The year is 2025. Dr. Kenji Ito, a renowned art historian specializing in the Sengoku Jidai, Warring States period, of Japan, lived a life devoted to dusty scrolls and museum silence. Yet, Kenji harbored a secret yearning that transcended academics, an inexplicable, persistent ache for a past he never lived. His current obsession was a priceless artifact, a katana known as Mizukage, Shadow of Water, housed deep within the private collection of the Kyoto National Museum. The Mizukage was unique. Unlike other katanas of its era, its blade was unnaturally light, almost ethereal, and the hamon, temper line, was not the typical cloud or wave pattern, but a delicate, swirling vortex that seemed to capture and hold the light of a hidden, moving moon. The legend surrounding it claimed the blade was forged by a heartbroken master who sealed the spirit of his lost love within the steel itself. For centuries, the Mizukage was said to remain icy cold to the touch, no matter the ambient temperature. Kenji had spent months securing permission for a detailed, non-invasive spectral analysis of the Mizukage. His peers believed the legends were simple folklore, but Kenji's gut told him the coldness of the blade was an energetic anomaly. The analysis was scheduled for a quiet, late evening in the museum's conservation lab. As Kenji activated the advanced magnetic resonance scanner, the Mizukage, resting on its velvet stand, began to hum, a low, resonant frequency that vibrated through the floor. The lab temperature plummeted instantly, frosting the windows. The scanner display didn't show steel or carbon, it showed a complex, fluctuating energy field. At the center of the blade, the scanner detected a distinct, localized human consciousness signature, pulsing with the same rhythmic flow as the swirling hamon. The legend was real, a spirit was trapped within the steel. Just as Kenji reached out to stop the overheating scanner, the energy surge peaked. A blinding, silvery flash erupted from the Mizukage. The light condensed, solidifying into a figure standing directly over the blade. It was a woman, impossibly dressed in the exquisite, multi-layered silks of the Heian period court, circa 950 AD. Her face was delicate, serene, framed by long, black hair, and her eyes, though wide open, held a chilling, distant sorrow, as if she were looking through time itself. She was the trapped spirit, the lost love of the master swordsmith. The woman did not speak. Her presence exuded intense cold, but also a profound, familiar sorrow that pierced Kenji's scientific defenses. Before Kenji could move or speak, the woman glanced at the katana, her expression shifting from sadness to sudden, sharp terror. She focused her gaze on Kenji, and her voice, a whisper of wind chimes in the winter air, finally reached him, not through his ears, but directly into his consciousness. Save the master. The blade hungers. It calls the storm. The woman's silvery form suddenly expanded, dissolving the boundaries of the lab. Kenji's world twisted violently. The museum walls melted into swirling, dark smoke, and the modern sounds of the city were replaced by the cacophony of war cries and clashing steel. He stumbled, finding himself no longer on the clean floor of the lab, but in the muddy, blood-soaked ground of an ancient battlefield. The heavy smell of iron, smoke, and fear saturated the air. He was in the Sengoku Jidai. He looked down at himself. His modern clothes were gone, replaced by the simple, practical hakama and tunic of a civilian retainer. He clutched something in his hand. It was the Mizukage katana, the blade now feeling unnervingly heavy, its surface radiating a familiar, profound cold. He looked up just as a terrifying wave of samurai warriors, their banners emblazoned with the symbol of a blood moon, charged toward his position. Leading the charge, a lone figure stood out. It was a man, dressed in the dark, lacquered armor of a high-ranking officer, his face masked by a fearsome, demonic mempo, face guard. The man was wielding a huge, two-handed katana, and his movements were lethal, a whirlwind of death. As the masked samurai turned toward Kenji, the woman's mental voice, faint but desperate, echoed in his mind one last time, "That is the master, Kenji. His heart is consumed by the blade's hunger. Save him from the steel, or be consumed with him." Kenji, the scholar who had never held a weapon in his life, stood on a battlefield with the infamous, cursed Mizukage in his hand, facing the armored swordsman, the very master of the blade. His journey had begun, not as a history lesson, but as a fight for a soul trapped 1,000 years ago. The moment Kenji realized the gravity of his displacement, the fact that he, a historian, was now facing a charging samurai in the 16th century, was eclipsed by the sheer terror of survival. The armored warrior, the master who forged the Mizukage, approached with the measured, deadly focus of a man utterly detached from life. His enormous katana, a blur of motion, cut down the remnants of a banner nearby, sending the silk snapping like a gunshot. Kenji, clutching the cool, weighty Mizukage, frantically searched for the woman's spirit guide. "Where are you? What do I do? I'm an historian, not a fighter." The mental voice of the spirit, which he now knew was Aya, the master's lost love, was faint but insistent, like the rustle of leaves against a distant windowpane. "Do not fight the master, Kenji. Fight the blade's hunger. It feeds on his sorrow and the blood he spills. You must touch his heart, not his steel." The masked master stopped 10 feet away. The demonic mempo hid his face, but the intense, hostile energy radiating from him was palpable. He raised his heavy katana, its tip gleaming with a dangerous, hungry red light. This wasn't just a man, this was the personification of the blade's curse. The master spoke, his voice muffled and distorted by the mask, yet heavy with authority and despair. "You wear the robes of a scholar, yet you hold the blade of a demon. Are you sent by the shogun to collect your payment in blood, outsider? I accept the challenge. Come and be cut down by the shadow of water's true master." Kenji knew that if he engaged in combat, he would be instantly killed. He threw down the Mizukage. The icy blade clattered into the mud, an act of utter disrespect that made the surrounding, fighting samurai briefly pause their battle. "I am not a soldier," Kenji shouted, falling to his knees. He used the only tools he had, language and history. "I am Kenji Ito. I know your sorrow, master. You are not a demon, you are a man trapped by a promise. The blade poisons your soul." The master froze. The great, blood-red katana wavered in his grip. The silence of the surrounding battle was eerie, broken only by the distant screams. "Sorrow?" the master repeated, his voice laced with venomous self-hatred. "My sorrow is the forge, scholar. My promise was broken when Aya was lost, and now the Mizukage demands balance in the blood of men." As he spoke Aya's name, the Mizukage lying in the mud pulsed with icy light, and the master's armored figure began to crackle with dark, magnetic energy. The blade's hunger was pushing him past the brink. Kenji realized the curse was fueled by the master's guilt over losing Aya. He had to show the master that Aya was not lost, she was near. "She is here, master," Kenji yelled desperately. "She is not dust and memory. She is the ice in the steel. She is the shadow you seek to escape." Kenji pointed to the Mizukage. As he did, Aya's mental presence surged through him, an intense wave of grief and pure, ancient love. He felt her desperation to be seen, to stop the killing. He lunged toward the cursed katana, grabbing its icy hilt. As his skin met the cold steel, the energy signature he had first detected in the modern lab flared violently. Kenji didn't lift the blade to fight, he lifted it toward the master, presenting it like a mirror. "Look at her, master. Look into the heart of the Mizukage. She is not lost. She is waiting for you to drop the mask." The master recoiled, as if struck by an unseen force. He roared in pain, but it was a spiritual pain. He lowered his weapon and slowly reached up, his massive, gauntlet hand trembling as he lifted the terrifying mempo from his face. The face revealed was not fearsome, but heart-wrenchingly familiar to Kenji. It was a man worn down by grief, his features identical to a charcoal sketch Kenji had seen of the swordsmith in the museum archives. But his eyes were not his own, they were vacant, glowing with the dangerous red light of the curse. As the master looked at the presented Mizukage, the swirling vortex hamon of the blade seemed to distort, and within the icy steel, a fleeting, shimmering image appeared, Aya's sorrowful face. The sight hit the master with the force of a thunderbolt. The red light vanished from his eyes. He collapsed to his knees, his heavy katana falling with a dull clang. He was broken, the centuries of grief finally surfacing. "Aya, Is this the hell you sent me to? He whispered, tears mixing with the grime on his face. Aya's gentle, mental voice reached both men. No, my master. This is the crossroads of time. I sealed my soul in the steel to stop the hunger. Now that you are free, we must use the blade's power to seal the path before the storm finds us. The master was free, but the Mizukage's power was volatile. The sky above the battlefield, already darkened by storm clouds, began to crackle, and the swirling vortex hamon on the blade grew rapidly, threatening to suck Kenji, the master, and the entire battlefield into the temporal rift. The rift is opening! Kenji shouted, pulling the stunned master to his feet. We need to get to neutral ground, somewhere protected. Where was the sword forged, master? Where did you lose her? The master, now merely a man named Hiroshi, pointed a trembling, gauntlet finger toward a distant, ancient forest. The Mizukage. The Water Willow Sanctuary. Where I lost her, and where the forge lies. We must hurry, Kenji. The storm is coming for the shadow of water. The battlefield, moments before a scene of chaotic slaughter, was suddenly eerily quiet. The surrounding samurai, unnerved by the master's dramatic breakdown and the strange, localized shimmering of the air around Kenji and Hiroshi, drew back, mistaking the temporal rift for powerful sorcery. Kenji, the scholar-turned-warrior guide, used the momentary confusion to drag the emotionally shattered Hiroshi, still burdened by his heavy, lacquered armor, away from the immediate danger. He clutched the cursed Mizukage, its icy cold a constant reminder of Aya's trapped presence and the ticking clock of the temporal breach. The distant sanctuary, Mizukage, the Water Willow Sanctuary, was miles away, nestled deep within the forested hills. They abandoned Hiroshi's fallen steed, knowing the terrain demanded speed and stealth. As they fled, Aya's mental voice, stronger now that Hiroshi's consciousness was no longer suppressed by the blade's curse, guided them through the dense woods. The storm is the blade's reflection, Kenji. The chaotic energy of the Sengoku Jidai, amplified by Hiroshi's grief. It seeks to consume this moment in time and destroy the purity of the water forge. Hiroshi, slowly regaining his senses, was overwhelmed by the sudden reality of 400 years of bloodshed and the immediate presence of Aya, the ghost he had mourned for centuries. He looked at Kenji, the outsider, who held his love's prison. You speak the tongue of the spirits, Hiroshi rasped, his eyes wide. Who are you, and why does she use you as a vessel? I am from your future, Hiroshi, Kenji explained, struggling to keep the fantastic simple. I found the Mizukage in a museum, where you and your world are history. Aya pulled me here, across time, because I am the only one outside the blade's power. I am here to help you free her, and yourself, from the curse. Hiroshi was a man of honor and steel, but the revelation broke his remaining cynicism. My life was a lie of grief, my sword, a prison. Tell me, scholar from the future, what is the cost of freedom? Aya says we must use the water forge to seal the blade's power, Kenji replied, looking down at the Mizukage. She needs to be released from the steel before the temporal storm rips this time apart. They arrived at the sanctuary just as the sun began to set, a tranquil, forgotten place of moss-covered stone and ancient cherry trees. The forge was located in a small, stone-lined cave behind a magnificent, weeping willow whose roots trailed into a pure, natural spring. This spring, Hiroshi explained, provided the sacred, icy water essential for the blade's unique quench, Turtlestorm. Inside the forge cave, the tools of Hiroshi's mastery lay untouched, the bellows, the hammer, and a deep, square stone pool filled with the icy spring water, the water forge itself. As Kenji placed the Mizukage on the stone anvil, the air in the cave grew intensely cold, and Aya's silvery form materialized fully, shimmering above the blade. She was ethereal, yet vividly present, her face a heartbreaking mix of joy and deep sorrow as she looked at Hiroshi. My master, her voice resonated gently, a caress of cold air. I sealed my soul in the steel to stop your endless battle. The Mizukage must be quenched one final time in the water forge, not to harden the steel, but to unbind the soul. She explained the final, terrifying process. The blade needed to be heated to its forging point one last time. When it reached maximum temperature, the soul-bound curse would be released. At that moment, before the curse could escape and manifest as the final, destructive temporal storm, the blade had to be plunged into the cold waters of the forge. The water, sacred and pure, would not only sever Aya's connection to the steel but also seal the temporal rift that brought Kenji here. But if you unbind the soul, what happens to you, Aya? Kenji asked, dread gripping his chest. Aya looked at him, then at Hiroshi, her expression serene. My time on Midgard ended centuries ago, scholar. To unbind the soul is to grant it peace, to finally pass through the crossroads of time. Hiroshi stepped forward, his warrior's resolve returning, but his hands trembled. I forged this curse. I will be the one to unbind it. Kenji, light the bellows. We need the fire of the master, and the pure water of the spring. As Kenji worked the heavy leather bellows, forcing oxygen into the glowing coals, Hiroshi took up the heavy forging hammer. He placed the Mizukage into the heart of the furnace, the sword he had forged in grief now destined to be the instrument of his redemption. Outside the sanctuary, the sky turned a furious, sickly yellow. A howling wind whipped the branches of the willow tree, and the rhythmic sound of distant thunder, the advancing temporal storm, grew louder, threatening to shatter the fragile peace of the ancient sanctuary. They were running out of time. The final, perilous heat was rising. The heat inside the forge cave became unbearable, but the icy presence of the Mizukage, now buried in the glowing coals, was fighting the fire. The ancient steel resisted the purification, its embedded curse struggling against the heat of redemption. Hiroshi, his muscular frame encased in the heavy armor, worked the iron tongs, his movements precise and burdened by history. Kenji pumped the bellows relentlessly, his modern body struggling to keep pace with the master's centuries of practice. Aya's ethereal form shimmered above the furnace, acting as a living thermometer, her mental presence guiding their timing. Not yet, Hiroshi. The steel resists the heat of the soul. We must reach the point of unbinding, the true heart of the blade. Outside, the advancing temporal storm unleashed its fury. The air pressure dropped violently. The howl of the wind was deafening, and bolts of sickly yellow energy, the chaotic reflection of the Sengoku War, struck the ancient willow tree outside, causing its branches to spark and smolder. The sound of distant, distorted war cries echoed through the mountain, signaling the storm's imminent arrival. We are running out of time. Kenji yelled over the roar of the wind, his voice hoarse. The storm is here. If it touches the forge, it will shatter time itself. Hiroshi ignored the external chaos, focused only on the metal. Finally, the Mizukage yielded. It was pulled from the coals, no longer simply red-hot, but glowing with an intense, pure silvery white light, the terrifying color of raw, unbound energy. The swirling vortex hamon on its surface was visible, but now the size of a coin, ready to escape. Now, master. Aya's voice surged through their minds, tinged with finality and relief. The curse is free. Quench the blade. As the Mizukage reached the point of unbinding, a tiny, luminous sphere of dark, swirling energy, the essence of the blade's hunger and the temporal rift, burst from the blade's surface. It expanded instantly, becoming a miniature, localized vortex that threatened to consume Kenji and the forge. Hiroshi, with a roar of vengeance against the curse that had ruined his life, didn't hesitate. He raised the silver-white blade high above his head, drawing the eye of the swirling vortex. He looked at Aya one last time, his eyes filled with the love that the curse could never extinguish. I give you peace, my Willow. Live free of my sorrow. He plunged the Mizukage with shattering force into the heart of the deep, icy spring water of the water forge. The effect was instantaneous and cataclysmic. A deafening, crystalline shatter echoed through the cave. A tremendous cloud of freezing steam and silver light erupted from the stone pool, filling the cave. The tiny, localized dark vortex was instantly neutralized and condensed. The spiritual energy that had been trapped in the steel, Aya's soul, was visibly released, rising from the water as a beautiful, gentle light, finally free from its earthly prison. The light ascended towards the ceiling, pausing momentarily before Hiroshi. Her gentle, mental voice reached both men one last time, a farewell of profound gratitude. Thank you, my master. Thank you, Scholar Kenji. The temporal rift is sealed. The Willow is free. With a final, shimmering release, the light vanished. Outside the cave, the raging temporal storm instantly dissipated. The sickly yellow sky cleared, and the wind died, leaving behind only the gentle dripping of melting snow. The Sengoku Jidai, and Kenji's own timeline, were safe. The forge cave was quiet. Hiroshi stood at the pool, his armor soaked, his chest heaving, holding the now cold Mizukage. The blade was still beautiful, but its unique hamon was gone, replaced by the simple, honorable temper line of a well-made katana. It was just steel now, the curse and the soul both gone. Kenji, physically exhausted but emotionally overwhelmed, looked at the sword. She is gone, he whispered. Hiroshi, the master, finally lowered his mask, his face showing exhaustion but also the first trace of peace he had known in centuries. She is free, scholar. A warrior's debt is paid in blood, a master's, in steel. We sealed the rift, but Kenji. Hiroshi's expression darkened with sudden, fierce understanding. The seal requires a cost. You are the anomaly from the future. The forge has stabilized this time, but the unbinding of the curse requires the anomaly to be removed. You must return to your time, now. The water forge will not allow you to remain. As he spoke, the ground beneath Kenji began to dissolve into a familiar, shimmering silver light, the temporal expulsion process starting without warning. Hiroshi was right. The ancient magic and the stable timeline were pushing the outsider back. Kenji didn't belong here. The silver light rapidly enveloped Kenji, pulling him from the forge cave. He reached out to Hiroshi, the master, the man he had saved and who had, in turn, saved his world. Hiroshi! Kenji yelled over the rising temporal distortion. What about you? What happens now? Hiroshi stood tall amidst the fading light, the Mizukage held reverently in his hands. He was once again a man of honor, ready to face his own time. My place is here, scholar. My life as a warrior must continue, but my soul is at peace. I owe you a debt of honor, Kenji Ito, that can never be repaid across time. Hiroshi quickly unfastened a small, intricately carved jade hilt ornament from his katana's grip, a tiny, beautiful carving of a willow leaf. He threw it just before the light consumed Kenji entirely. The journey back was as violent and disorienting as the arrival. Kenji felt the chaotic pull of 5 centuries compressing and then releasing him. He slammed back onto the clean, anti-static floor of the conservation lab in Kyoto. The fluorescent lights hummed, the air conditioning whirred, and the cold snap was gone. Only seconds seemed to have passed in 2025. He was wearing his modern shirt and trousers. The Mizukage katana lay innocently on its velvet stand, its blade now merely cold, not impossibly icy, its hamon the simple, beautiful temper line Hiroshi had given it. The curse was gone. Kenji was shaking, covered in the ghost of mud and sweat. He was a survivor of a 500-year-old battle. Clutched tightly in his hand was the jade willow ornament, a tangible piece of the Sengoku Jidai, and a symbol of Hiroshi's debt. He collected himself, ensuring the Mizukage was secure and that no one had noticed the temporal anomaly. He never spoke of his journey. He became a man haunted by a history he didn't just study, but lived. His academic focus shifted. He abandoned the study of the Mizukage and devoted his life to a seemingly simple, ancillary artifact in the Kyoto archives, the uncredited charcoal sketch of the swordsmith Hiroshi, which showed a face now etched forever in Kenji's memory. Kenji knew that somewhere in the past, Hiroshi was living a life of peace, his heart finally free. Kenji began writing, not academic papers, but historical fiction, epic tales of a wise, honorable warrior who chose peace over power, eventually becoming a quiet, revered master in the Sengoku Jidai. He published these under a pseudonym, finding catharsis in celebrating the life he had helped save. He kept the jade willow ornament on his desk, its cool surface a constant reminder of Aya's sacrifice and the master's redemption. Years passed. Kenji became a respected, if eccentric, author of historical fiction. One day, while researching a minor historical event linked to the Water Willow Sanctuary, he found a long-lost, authenticated historical document. The document was a simple, honorable will, dated 1603 AD, from a swordsmith named Hiroshi, who had dedicated his life to teaching the way of peace, his fame stemming from a single, legendary act of self-sacrifice on a battlefield centuries earlier. The will named his only living descendant, a daughter, and bequeathed to her his most prized possession, the Mizukage Katana. Kenji smiled. Hiroshi had not only survived but had lived a full, honorable life, free of the curse. The timeline was intact, sealed by the souls who cared enough to save it. Kenji returned to the Kyoto National Museum one final time. He stood before the Mizukage, now simply a beautiful, cold katana. He reached into his pocket and placed the jade willow ornament on the pedestal beside the blade, a warrior's payment returned, a love story finally closed. He left the museum, walking out into the modern sunlight of Kyoto, the air no longer charged with war or grief, but with the quiet promise of the future. He was finally free of the past, carrying only the honor of the two souls who had gifted him his life back.